Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Pamela, and you are watching Pam Entertainment TV, where we review movies, television series, and incidents in pop culture. And y'all, this is an incidents in pop culture. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you care. All right, what we're going to do today is we're going to go over uh, this Cassie lawsuit one more time. Now, we're not going to go over it in its entirety. What we're going to do is kind of go over some of the things that she has alleged. Now, why are we doing this? We saw this past Friday where CNN dropped the video of Sean Combs, aka Puffy, aka Puff Daddy, aka Diddy, aka Brother Love, aka whatever aka you want to put in, and aka whatever iteration you see him as. We saw live, not Memorex, the video of him at the Intercontinental Hotel. Basically, you see Cassie, and I'm just going to describe it. You see Cassie leaving the hotel room because she didn't have her shoes on. She had her bag. She was leaving. She was getting ready to go, and Sean Combs ran out of the hotel room in nothing but a towel wrapped around a towel and some socks. He had on a pair of socks. He ran out of that room, ran to the elevator, punched her in the back of the head. She falls down. He drags her down. He then proceeds to kick her a couple of times, grab her stuff, and then try to drag her back in the room. He doesn't is not successful in that. She goes to try to call somebody on the hotel house phone, and he then sits down and then starts hurling objects at her. And from what I understand, and then we're going to go back through this lawsuit, it was a glass vase. So the reason why I wanted to go back up, because when we first saw this lawsuit, when we first saw it, it was and I will admit it was a lot. You know what I mean? It was a lot. Now I will tell you, it's not that I didn't believe what was going on. I will tell you that with Sean Combs, there has been so much stuff being vocalized in the zeitgeist about his who he is and what he does. And for me, I am very, very thankful that because a lot of us believed what was going on in the zeitgeist of what was going on, but there was really no proof because of the fact that who he was and how he operated. He was able to, and this is alleged, he was able to possibly pay a lot of people off. We do understand that he paid the Intercontinental upwards to $50,000 to pay for the damages that he did to the hotel, and also to pay for the security footage. Thank goodness, whoever it was that saved this footage was able to save this footage and get it out here. I am wondering if Cassie had this footage, her team had this footage. I am unsure, but somebody had this footage. One of the things that I do want to kind of go over that's interesting to me, we did see in the news that the Intercontinental Hotel and that whole group has said that, at this time, that this particular hotel is locally owned. They do not own this hotel, or they're not affiliated with this hotel. But I am wondering, were they affiliated with this hotel in 2016? Because this is when this footage came out. Because I am of the belief that not only should Cassie be suing Sean Combs and all the different enterprises that have to do with them, but she also needs to be suing this hotel chain. And simply because there was security footage. Now, I do understand that within these security, these hotel chains and all this other stuff, you will have individuals who are working for their own personal gain. However, if they're doing that as employees, I think that the hotel chain is liable. My lawyer friends, y'all let me know if that is the case. Please leave it down in the comments, because I am looking at the fact that the now they're saying that the statutes of limitations have run out for the assault. But I am wondering with the things, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to go back over it. We want to go over some of these incidents in this lawsuit, because I'm wondering if the actions that happened after this assault can be coupled, and California can levy charges against him. Because I did go back and just kind of did a cursory review of what California statutes are. And I think this particular assault, I think it's up to 4 years. You have 4 years uh, to uh, to file for it. So that's 17, 18, 19, 20. So she had up to 2020 to be able to file for those particular charges. But there are some sexual charges that have no statute of limitations. And so I'm wondering if anything like that happened after that. Is that something that the state of California can charge him with? I don't know. I do know that the federal government, via a RICO Act, is looking into Sean Combs for uh, certain different things. Now, they have not come out and said exactly what they're looking into, but we do know that last month they did raid his home in Los Angeles, and I do believe they raided his home in Miami. And they did get tapes and video footage of different things in different instances and things like that. Now, allegedly, it has been told that Sean Combs likes to tape some of this stuff. So I am just truly interested to see if we go back over this lawsuit, and we're going to read some of the things going through this lawsuit. I am interested to see if um, some of these things, or how some of these things are jiving with what's reported, because we can clearly see that what was reported by Cassie in regards to this particular incident has come to pass. So let's go back over this. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. All right, so this is just part of it. I wanted to do this because I've gone through this lawsuit. You can see that I've highlighted and gone through all of this stuff. So I wanted to talk about, or just read some of the things. So we're just going to read through some of this stuff. And what I see here, and we're going to read on page 9. This is page 9. Let me remove a couple of these overlays so you can see the pages. All right, you can see that, because we don't need the overlays here. So let's start here. Mr. Combs lures Miss Ventura into a relationship. So let's read that. Despite her clear rejections of Mr. Combs' advances, Mr. Combs continued to demand Miss Ventura spend time with him, including for a weekend at Mr. Combs' residence in Miami and for nights out in New York City. On one particular night around September 2007, Mr. Combs insisted on taking Miss Ventura out. Miss Ventura acquiesced, fearing that rejecting Mr. Combs' request would have repercussions for her album deal with Mr. Combs and his company, Bad Boy Records. Mr. Combs picked up Miss Ventura from her apartment in Manhattan in a blue luxury vehicle. Miss Ventura was surprised that when she got into the car, Mr. Combs was already inebriated. And I wanted to mention that because a lot of things that when we talk about Sean Combs and other instances of with him is the fact of his inebriation. He was already lit, as we would say. He handed her a pill and told her to take it. When Miss Ventura asked what the pill was, Mr. Combs dismissed her and told her she would like it. She later learned the pill was ecstasy, something Miss Ventura had never before tried and did not want to try. This was the first time Mr. Combs got her high. And that is very important. Now, if you watch my stunt shows and shenanigan video this past weekend, we talked about the incident at the hotel about Puffy, Diddy, whatever you call him. And we also went over a story in regards to a teacher allowing people to unbraid his hair. And I talked about that these how grooming starts, because you put forth these incidents, and at first it starts off with compliments and blurring boundary lines, and then once you feel like you have blurred those boundary lines, then all of this kind of takes place. And as you look at this, I'm just thinking about the fact that here she is, a young woman who is embarking on a musical career, and the person who has her musical career at hand is also talking about wanting to take her out on dates. He wants to give her drugs, and her feeling like she was in a position that she couldn't tell him no. Now, you remember Cat Williams at the first of the year said, you got to tell Diddy no. You got to tell him no. But in these types of situations, you see where she was, all these things were mulling in her head. And also, I want us to be very clear, because we hear this even when we talk in real life and when we talk on this life of being on the internet. We socialize women to acquiesce, or to be very to acquiesce to authority, to acquiesce to what's being asked of them from men, because that is what is appealing uh, from men to women. So men find it appealing when a woman acquiesces to what their demands are. But what we don't teach is the fact, or what we don't reinforce in our young women, the fact that when you're fight or flight, when something doesn't feel right, it's not right, regardless if the person is in power, is speaking to you in a very nice and soft tone. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And I think that that's one of the things that we miss when we talk about these power dynamics and things. And these are the things that we do not teach our young women. And then we turn around and we'll say, "Oh well, she should have known better. I wouldn't have done that. She would have done that." Socially, we don't teach that. We teach young women that their worth comes from acquiescing to the demands of a man, and also being a very nurturing person in regards to rearing children and things like that. So we take what's in essence in a woman, and then we use it against that person, we use it against her. And I think that it's very important that we as women continue, from young girls to older to whatever, that we continue to talk to our young women and our young girls about not dismissing their fight or flight, because I'm quite sure that Cassie had a fight or flight, but that is coupled with the fact that she wants to further a career in her music, and this is the person who has the authority to do that. And I've often wondered um how that culture could change, when you have young women. Why it's so important that you have a good team around you, so things like this, I mean, because I'm not going to tell y'all that uh freaky ass folk are not going to be up and down, because we want to always think about and talk about freaky ass folks in the music industry, but there are freaky ass folks in every aspects of our lives, even regular degler schnegler jobs. You won't be surprised, because I'm quite sure that you all understand and are very clear and know that there are freaky ass folk on our regular jobs and things like that. So I am just interested in how culturally we as the people can change the culture of all of this, instead of making it a blame game of, oh well, she should have known better and all this other stuff. I'm not looking at it from that standpoint. I'm looking at it solution based. Is there something that we as the consumers of the art, we as the consumers of the music, is there something that we can do to make sure that those that want to participate in the art form of music and things like that, that we as the people can do things or say things or require things, so that there will be an issue of something like this being frowned upon, instead of something like this that's going on being, oh well, that's just how they do. I, I'm just very interested in that particular angle, but let's just continue. Mr. Combs then proceeded to drive recklessly at a high speed down the West Side Highway of Manhattan. Miss Ventura was very scared, but did not dare object to Mr. Combs, who appeared drunk, high, and agitated. Mr. Combs took Ventura to an upscale lounge in downtown Manhattan, where he proceeded to get into an altercation with the security staff that would not permit Mr. Combs to enter, presumably because he was belligerent. Now, when was this? This was 2007. Puffy was puffy at that time. I think he was puffy. He was a music exec, but I don't know how respected he was after that. And this was 2007. When did let me check something really quick. Y'all bear with me just a second. Okay. Yeah, this was way after that. Okay. Sorry. I was gonna make a point, but there's no need. All right. For the remainder of the night, Mr. Combs messaged Miss did I miss something? Mr. Combs took Miss Ventura to an upscale lounge, belligerent. Miss Ventura decided to go home. For the remainder of the night, Mr. Combs messaged Miss Ventura incessantly, complaining that he left him high and in love. So he was upset that she decided to go home and that she left him. In the early fall of 2007, Mr. Combs flexed his power and influence when he paid a promoter to create a fake flyer for a party hosted by Miss Ventura. This fake posting allowed Miss Ventura to have an excuse to go to Miami, Florida, and to get her away from her boyfriend by using the guise of a legitimate event she had to attend. Miss Ventura was stunned at how easily Mr. McCombs was able to recruit others to lie for him. So this was one of the things that I did want to point out. We do see that at that time Miss Ventura was in a relationship. And we do see, according to this filing, again, with this lawsuit, it was settled, and he paid her for whatever undisclosed amount. So he settled this lawsuit. But it's very interesting to see the lengths that he would go. He would use his professionalism, he would use his personal relationships with people to have this weave this web of lies to get this particular woman to go where he wanted her to go, because he wanted to have a level of control over her. And as we see this, we kind of see this, and we're thinking, Child, I don't understand. That's too much. But when you're trying to do this, when you see people who operate within this type of life, they will do any and everything, and they will use any sort of resource or cachet that they have with any other person to be able to make this happen. Now, for those of us that are like, seems too much. It is. It is, but you have to understand that there are people that operate like this. And so let's continue. Miss Ventura was uncomfortable with the fake flyer, but because the request to go to Miami was made by the owner of her record label, and because she was scared to go against his wishes and face repercussions of her um, nascent career because it was new, Miss Ventura agreed to join Mr. Combs in Florida. During this trip to Miami, Mr. Combs provided Miss Ventura with copious amounts of drugs. She became more intoxicated than she ever been, and her intoxication lasted throughout the weekend trip. As she wanted Mr. Combs to continue to support her career, she felt she could not refuse Mr. Combs, urging her to take more drugs. After providing her with drugs, Mr. Combs had sexual intercourse with Miss Ventura during this trip. So there is a plying of a drugs. Now we do understand with this home raid that happened back last month that Sean Combs' drug mule was arrested with copious amounts of drugs. Now, remember, he was arrested in the right in front of Sean Combs and his family because they were arrested in Miami, and it was told that they were going on a quote unquote, he was going on a quote unquote spring break tour with his daughters. Why do you have copious amounts of drugs when you're going on a spring break tour when you're going on spring break tour with your daughters? Who else is going on this spring break tour with your daughter? And again, why do you need these copious amounts of drugs? So I'm curious as to the drug mule and what he says. All right. Within 2 years of meeting Mr. Combs, Miss Ventura found herself lured into the immediate circle of her boss, the owner of her record label, and one of the most powerful men in the entertainment industry. Mr. Combs exerts control over Miss Ventura's career and personal life. From the very start of their relationship, Mr. Combs exerted his power and influence over Miss Ventura. The dynamics was fueled by their nearly 20-year age difference, as well as their relative positions in the entertainment industry, with Mr. Combs considered a music mogul and Miss Ventura at the very start of her career as an entertainer. Mr. Combs aggressive and demanding approach to those he worked with was made it almost impossible for anyone to challenge him. And Miss Ventura soon learned that Mr. Combs insisted on blind loyalty from everyone in his inner circle. Y'all, that was always important to me, blind loyalty, because you have a lot of folks that was in that circle, from that coming from the personal assistants, coming from the executives and anything like that. They made sure that whatever he asked for, he got. Now, if you watch the reality shows with Puffy, aka Diddy, aka Brother Love, you saw this. I remember there was like a documentary, and one of his first his first executive assistants and things like that. I remember her thinking, and I don't know why I want to say her name was Egypt. I don't know if that was her name or not. Y'all let me know down in the comment. But in this documentary, she was talking about how her working with Diddy helped her move on to different companies and be able to be a great asset because she learned how to get Diddy whatever he needed. She learned how to think outside the box, all of these different things. And I'm just sitting here thinking, whatever he asked for, they made sure that they got. And he made sure that that blind loyalty was ever present with them. Although Miss Ventura had saved up some earnings from her young modeling career, Mr. Combs' ostentatious display of wealth was intimidating to her. Uh, he put her on. We're just going to kind of go through some of this stuff. He had wads of cash. He plied her with expensive vacations. And around 2008, 2009, Mr. Combs began to rent an apartment in Manhattan for her. The apartment was within walking distance of Mr. Combs' New York residence. So it appeared like she was out here living on her own, but he was paying for it, and he made sure that it was close enough to where he was living, that he'd live in his residence. Because you remember, if I'm not mistaken, around this time he was still in a relationship with Kim Porter. Now, y'all let me know in the comments if I'm a little if that was true. He was still in a relationship with Kim Porter, so he had her, Cassie, living in another apartment down the street, so that way that she would be separate from what else that he had going on at the time, and plus he was dating other people besides Miss Porter. So let's continue. Around 2010, Mr. Combs similarly paid for an apartment in Los Angeles, which was located 5 minutes away from his residence in Los Angeles. He paid for many of her apartments in California, and also purchased a Jaguar for her around 2013, 2014. All aspects of Miss Ventura's life were controlled by either Mr. Combs or his management companies. Every event Miss Ventura attended, from the travel to the makeup and clothing, was paid for directly by Mr. Combs and his affiliate companies. Compounding all of this encompassing intrusion into her life, Mr. Combs secured his control over the young and impressionable Miss Ventura by introducing her to a drug-fueled lifestyle that kept her complacent and compliant. Because remember, once he was able to initially give her those drugs, that continued on, because when she did break away from Diddy, she entered into a drug rehab program. So let's continue. Mr. Combs first introduced Miss Ventura to opiates around 2008, and would often have pills and other drugs out in the open like candy, quote unquote, like candy. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs had been addicted to prescription painkillers and took ecstasy frequently. At first, Miss Ventura was given the prescriptions that Mr. Combs received from a doctor in Miami, Florida. Eventually, when Mr. Combs exhausted his supply of pills, he demanded that Miss Ventura procure prescriptions from this Miami doctor in her own name. Now that is interesting, because I don't know if you all know that opiates and stuff like that. This was also around the time where the Fed started cracking down on doctors writing prescriptions for like hydrocodone and all these type of opiate like drugs. And so you could only have so many prescriptions in your name, and you could only get to so many drugs. I think you can only get like a 30-day supply of these drugs. Now, I don't know. I doubt very seriously that he was allowing his insurance to pay for it. They probably paid for maybe a couple of them, but after that, he probably was getting prescriptions and paying out of pocket himself. I don't know if that would cause the Fed anything, but I do know that there was a big crackdown. So this is interesting, because you remember, if you all don't remember, around this time as well, this was the issue with Michael Jackson. There were drugs that Michael Jackson was getting that ended up that's why he was hiring private doctors, because private doctors can get these prescriptions, purchase these drugs and things like that, and issue some of these drugs to their patients. Anyway, let's keep going. Mr. Combs also became deeply involved with Miss Ventura's personal life, with his personal staff attending to Miss Ventura's day-to-day travel and other needs, including medical care. On multiple occasions, Mr. Combs had Miss Ventura's personal medical records sent directly to his email. For instance, when Miss Ventura began experiencing memory loss, potentially due to the excessive drug use and injuries caused by Mr. Combs' beatings, as described below, her MIR results were provided directly to Mr. Combs. So he understood, if we're looking at this, he understood what was going on with her, with the drugs, taking so many of the drugs, and with the beatings. He was making sure that all of that was sent to him, and he probably then from there he judged how far to take certain things. Mm, mm. On multiple occasions, Mr. Combs had Miss Ventura. We read that. We read that. Here we go. Mr. Combs also repeatedly arranged for his staff to drive Miss Ventura to her doctor's appointments. In this way, Mr. Combs extended ownership over Miss Ventura. As another example of the way he manipulated Miss Ventura and ensured obedience early on in their relationship, he also asked Miss Ventura what she called her grandfather. When Mr. Ventura said that she referred to her grandfather as Pop Pop, Mr. Combs perversely insisted that Miss Ventura refer to him as that name. Mm. So this is where we get to, and I wanted to go over there because this is where we are getting to talking about the violence. So again, let me put this up here really quick, because we're going to be talking about this now. If you all are very sensitive about this is the time to pull off this video, because we're going to be talking about this stuff. All right. Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura's relationship is violent and abusive. What started as a whirlwind of celebrity meetings and drug and alcohol fueled parties, however, quickly turned frighteningly frightening and violent. I don't know why I can't speak to that. All right. Miss Ventura was also exposed to the intense violence that pervaded Mr. Combs' rise to fame. For example, on one occasion when Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura were using drugs together at his home, one of his security staff barged in and announced that Suge Knight, a longtime rival of Mr. Combs, was spotted at Mel's Drive-In Diner in Los Angeles. Mr. Combs began to get dressed, retrieved multiple guns from a safe, and ran out of his home to where he believed Mr. Knight was dining. Miss Ventura became terrified and began to cry. On at least two occasions, Mr. Combs demanded that Miss Ventura hold Mr. Combs' gun in a purse. Now, I want to stop right here, and I want to go over that first, that initial paragraph. In Mr. Rod Jones' lawsuit, he talked about Diddy and his group having guns, unlicensed guns that weren't registered to anyone, that he always kept firearms on him. Because again, on Lil Rod's lawsuit, he talked about some young man who was a friend of one of Diddy's sons, they having an argument at the studio that they were at recording this stuff, and that young man ended up getting shot. And that everyone in the studio started, or when the police were spoken to by Sean Combs' security, they made it seem like he was shot in a drive-by. But let's continue. On at least two occasions, Mr. Combs demanded that Miss Ventura hold Combs' gun. Now, this was one of the situations too back in the day. You remember with Shine, it was alleged that Puffy had Jennifer Lopez hold his gun in her purse. Now that was what was alleged. I don't know. That is what we talked about, and that's what we heard. Miss Ventura had no familiarity with guns and was petrified that the firearm would actually go off in her purse. There was no clear reason why Mr. Combs required her to hold his guns, except to reinforce to his young girlfriend that he was violent, powerful, and dangerous, and also to reinforce the fact that if anything popped off, he was going to be able to say, well, she's the one that brought the gun in. because I'm quite sure he handed her that gun in her hand. She put it in her purse. And so he was going to basically say, "Hey, I knew she had it in there. I was trying to get it away from her, but she's the one that carried the gun. She's the one that brought the gun in. I didn't bring the gun in." He was going to, he was going to also levy that she was going to be just as accountable to, if something happened, if that gun happened to be discharged. Over the next decade, multiple times each year, Mr. Cohn would violently beat Miss Ventura, leaving bruises on her body. After every instance in which he beat Miss Ventura, Mr. Cohn used his money and power to orchestrate extensive effort to hide the evidence of his abuse, including hiding Miss Ventura in hotels for days at a time to let her bruises heal. In one such instance, after a party with Jay-Z, Mr. Cohn beat Miss Ventura repeatedly in an escalade, including by kicking and hitting her. He forced her out of the vehicle on Fifth Avenue in New York City. She was eventually able to hail a cab and get to her apartment in Manhattan, where she cried in fear, realizing there was no one she could tell. Oh, I hate when that. You see, y'all see how I just marked this thing up. Uh, what had happened in the hands of the incredible, powerful man. She spent subsequent days hiding in her apartment. In January 2009, after Mr. Combs learned that Miss Ventura spoke to another music manager at a party in Los Angeles, he became enraged. She hoped speaking to this manager would allow her to further grow her career and that Mr. Combs would be happy for her. But instead, he became extremely angry and pulled her out of the club where the party was taking place. In the car leaving the club, Mr. Cohn beat Miss Ventura, pushing her into a corner of the vehicle and stomping on her face. Mr. Cohn's security staff, Roger Bounds, tried to stop the beating, but was unable to de escalate the situation. When the car arrived at Mr. Combs' residence, Mr. Ventura attempted to run away, but Mr. Combs followed her and proceeded again to kick her in the face. Miss Ventura was bleeding profusely and was ushered into Mr. Combs' home, where she began to throw up from the violent assault. So this was an earlier thing. So let's get into some of this other stuff because I'm building up to the 2016 incident at the Intercontinental Hotel, but I do want us to understand what was going on throughout this thing. I've read this before, but now that we have the video, we can definitely see the context of what was going on with her. Upon recognizing the damage he had done and the physical evidence of his abuse, he panicked and forced his staff to bring Ventura a hotel suite at the London Hotel in Los Angeles, where she was required to stay for a week. So he realized he beat the crap out of her. He realized that people were going to know that he beat the crap out of her. So he takes her and he places her in a hotel so that her bruising and things like that can heal. And this is where I don't know what the statute of limitations of all of this, because there are people, that this woman just got beaten by this man, and you all do all of these things to assist him into hiding what has happened. And if anybody that's listening to me and they're thinking, oh well, this is just too fantastical, it's not. It is not, because you can sit right here right now in your family and know you have someone in your family that has done some very god awful things, and how the people in your family will rally around this person to do whatever they need to do to hide what's going on with this person. Whether it's SA, whether it's DV, whether it's physical abuse, whatever it is, you will have people in your family that will rally around that person to try to make sure that this person, because within our community, because of the racism and the biases with the government and with the police and everything, we do understand and we know that black men will go to jail uh in copious amounts for very little things versus their white counterparts, their Asian counterparts, what have you. And they put this your family will then say, well, you don't want so and so to go to jail because they trying to put him in jail and stuff like that. They will try to guilt you into actually working for or working in on behalf of the person that is victimizing you so that that person won't go to jail. So if you understand it within your familiar context, a familiar context, extrapolate that out to people who are getting paid to do this. And as I said earlier, we have to build a culture where this is not normalized, where this is considered to be, as it is, odd and criminal. And not only is the perpetrator being dealt with, but the people who enabled the perpetrator to be dealt with. I think that that's very important for us to for me to put that right there. So let's continue. During this stay, as her injuries from the beating healed, Miss Ventura began to fully realize that Mr. Combs' tremendously loyal network not only knew about and witnessed his assault, but also that these witnesses were not willing to do anything meaningful to stop Mr. Combs' behavior. That's important. They weren't going to do anything to stop this behavior. Nothing. They're not going to do anything to stop this behavior because they wanted their jobs. Now, I do understand people need to work and all these other things, but we don't have systems in place that these people can then come forward and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's wrong. Someone needs to come in and do something about it. Why? Because again, in our United States of America, in which a lot of people will get mad if you say something untoward about that, we hold companies at higher reverence than we do our individuals. And then we want to turn around and tell an individual that you're so important to the United States of America and your family and all this other stuff, but as a corporations, no one does anything when these particular individuals are being victimized. But let's continue. She recognized that she was powerless, and the reporting Mr. Combs to the authorities would not alter Mr. Combs' status or influence, and would merely give Mr. Combs another excuse to hurt her. While in the hotel, she asked to go home to her parents, but Mr. Combs wouldn't let her leave. She lied to her mother when asked about the online gossip forum that reported the assault. So there, again, this number 70 is clear evidence what I was talking about, how within the zeitgeist people knew that there were some things going on. And even when she talked to her parents, she felt like she needed to lie because she knew she was going to get beaten again. She knew she was going to get beaten again, which is interesting. And she still had this hopes of being a pop star. Mr. Combs proceeded to instruct his assistant to purchase excessive amounts of gifts for Miss Ventura. So he plied her with a lot of gifts. And this is where you all, when who was it? Was it Stevie J? This is alleged. It was Stevie J or one of those rappers that were talking about, well, she was getting, I don't understand. These women, they complain about stuff like that, but they're getting stuff, they're buying stuff. But we also understand that these are gifts that are coming from a level of guilt from the person who is abusing you, because there are stages when this thing happens. There is the abuse, then there is the oh, I want some forgiveness, and they come and they be sweet to you, they buy things from you, and then it cycles back into the abuse again. But we have a lot of folks that'll turn around and say, well, she got all this stuff, why she didn't do this, or why she didn't do this, or why he didn't do this, and why he didn't do that. As we were reading, you saw how the grooming and the breakdown and all these things are happening. This lawsuit just tells you all of this stuff in about real time. So let's just keep going. Mr. Combs proceeded to instruct his assistant to purchase excessive amounts of gifts for Miss Ventura, which were delivered to the hotel room where she remained trapped. Miss Ventura was terrified, isolated, and unable to see a pathway out of Mr. Combs' abuse for her. She found herself becoming numb to the abuse she was experiencing and became entirely beholden to Mr. Combs' demands. She began to blindly follow his instructions out of fear of being on the receiving end of a vicious beating. By Mr. Combs' own admission, his relationship with Miss Ventura was like Bobby and Whitney, a clear acknowledgement of the unequal power dynamics and excessive domestic violence that permeated their relationship. From the outside looking in, Miss Ventura had heard others refer to her relationship with Mr. Combs as akin to Ike and Tina. Now this again, this is where I talk about these people that are working, that they understand and they knew what was going on, particularly if they were going to give nicknames to what was going on. Her volatile and abusive partner, who also owned her label and therefore held her future success in his hands, had fully extended control over her aspects of her life. And this is one of the things when I talk about as people being in the community, there should be something in there because of the fact, and this is all happening in California, this is all happening in New York. These are big hubs of the entertainment business. The state and people within the state, because the state's not going to move unless the people want the state to move. There should be clear and evident where something like this, particularly, there is no reason, or it should be very, very much frowned upon, because I remember this also happened with not this particular incident, but what I'm talking about, power dynamics. Because you all, I don't know if you all are old enough to remember, but this is the reason that you had Mariah Carey went through a lot of stuff that she went through. Now we all talk about Mariah Carey. She is an artist, she is a writer, she is a singer, she's a producer, she is all of those different things. But y'all remember when she married Tommy Mottola? And then when she decided to get out from around Tommy Mottola, because allegedly there was a lot of stuff going on within that relationship, he made it his business to try to derail her career. Go back and look that information up. It's a Google search. He made every effort to try to derail her career, even to the point that when she was trying to get a place to live in New York City, he would go to the realtors or whoever owned the building and basically tell them, do not sell to her, do not allow for her to live there. And he would say all these little different reasons as to why they shouldn't allow for her to live. And she would have those types of difficult problems. He was using, because she no longer wanted to be in a relationship with him, he was using his connections to keep her from just even simply owning an apartment and all of these little different things. And then when she was able to do that, they were charging her exorbitant prices in order for her to live there. I don't know if she still lives in New York or not. I think she lives in California, but I do remember her talking about that. Mr. Combs forces Miss Ventura into sex trafficking. Within a few months of beginning a romantic relationship with the 45-year-old Mr. Combs and the 23-year-old Miss Ventura. And this is what I say to you all, and I know I get a lot of pushback from men, and I'll get a lot of pushback from some women who are saying, well, if they're grown, they're grown. Y'all, these age differences mean a lot. She should be with somebody around her age. And what I say to young men, stop allowing these older men to tell you all how these young women are and how they don't like you and how they're this and how they're that. They're telling you this information to keep you all as young men frustrated and mad. And while you're over here frustrated and mad and on the internet with podcast mics talking about women, these older men are running around here going behind, while you're over here talking and being upset, they're down here with these younger women and they're causing all this mass confusion. So then when you talk about, oh, the Pookies and the Ray Rays and all this other stuff, and you get involved in all of these gender wars and all this other stuff, what I'm trying to tell you, young men, get your game up. Be authentically who you are. I don't expect you at 23. I don't even expect you at 33 to be multimillionaires. But what I do expect you all to be is good men. Say what you mean and mean what you say and stand firm of what you say. Let your word be your bond. Your morals and your values shown through. If there's something that you stand for it. And you don't allow anybody else to say not to stand for it. Let a young woman see those types of things. Make it so, and those are the types of things that are important. Now, I know there's a lot of folks that be talking about Birkin bags and all this. Those things are just cha-cha-cha. I'm just telling you, be really clear. But if a young woman can see that you are respectful, that you will have her back, and all of these different things, and you show a level of vulnerability, y'all will be fine. Stop letting these old men distract you from all of that. And ladies, stop letting these old men with these nice cars and these social security checks and retirement checks and all this other stuff, stop letting them sway you from that. Young women should be with young men. Middle-aged women should be with middle-aged men. Older women should be with older men. It is what it is. Because in your thought process and how you think, you all will think in the same level. There's a difference. 10 years is a big difference on how you think. If you come across a man that's 15 years older than you and he's thinking as a man younger than you, he hasn't grown up. You have to leave that particular man alone. Go with somebody within your 10-year spread. That's all I'm going to say. Go with somebody any man that's 20 or 30 something years old, older than you. There is a reason why he is not dating the women in his age group. There's a reason. Leave that man alone. Don't let that man try to convince you not to date a young man within your age. If you're 20 something years old, again, if you're 25 and you want to be married, a 35-year-old man is your spread. That you need to go from, you're 25, you need to find somebody no older than 35 years old if that's what you're talking about. And that's coming from an older woman. I'm just letting y'all know, because when you get involved with these older men, I'm telling you, their thought patterns and why they want to be with you, you need to be very conscious about why that is. Very conscious about why that is. And you have to ask those questions. If you're 45 years, if that man is 45 years old and you are 23 years old, you need to ask the question, why you want to be with me? I'm 23 years old. What is it that you believe that you have in common with me? We don't even see the world the same way. Y'all need to ask these questions on both sides, but let's continue. Mr. Combs, we're getting to this sex trafficking. Within a few months of beginning a romantic with the 45-year-old Mr. Combs and 22-year-old Miss Ventura felt beholden to his whims and demands. While in New York, Mr. Combs told Miss Ventura that he wanted to engage in a fantasy called voyeurism. Mr. Combs said that it would turn him on if he saw Miss Ventura with another dick. You see what I'm saying? That's you see what I'm saying? Because it's a power dynamic at that point. When you're 20 and something plus and he's buying you all these things, he's putting you up in an apartment, and you may think that that's great. There's always an ulterior motive. And ulterior motive is always some kind of deviant sexual thing. And y'all can say that I'm telling a tale and I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm just letting y'all know. The first time Mr. Combs hired a man and brought a man to his home in Los Angeles, the man, Mr. Combs, and Miss Ventura were masquerade masks and ingested drugs. And Mr. Combs directed Miss Ventura to perform sexual acts with this man while Mr. Combs watched. Because you begin to understand, men at that age, their sexual drive decreases and women's sexual drive increases at that age. So he knew he wasn't going to be able to be able to do what he needed to do with her. So he's convincing her, oh, well, to make me happy and to keep you in all this stuff, you need to do all of this stuff. Okay. And this is where we have the term, the freak offs and everything like that. So I'm going to skip some of this stuff. And I put on there about the freak offs and the gay rumors. So we're getting close because this is a 220. Okay, so let's start here in 96 and keep going. So 0.96. So we're starting right here, okay? Miss Ventura was repulsed by Mr. Combs' demands, but between the physical beatings and recognizing his incredible power and incredible temper, Miss Ventura became petrified of her partner and boss and felt like she could not say no. He even would present her with lavish gifts prior to or in the middle of the freak-offs, seemingly acknowledging the ways in which these forced sexual encounters constituted work for Miss Ventura, and that he needed to compensate her for this work. At one point, he had given her so many designer bracelets for freak-offs and immediately following his brutal beatings that she felt that she was shackled by his presence. Frequently, her anxiety before a freak-off would become so great that she would become physically ill, sometimes to the point of vomiting. While kneeling over the toilet, Mr. Combs would shame her into performing for him, eventually forcing her to get up and proceed with the encounter. She knew firsthand that telling Mr. Combs that she did not want to engage in the freak-offs was met by anger and violence. In addition, any suggestion that Miss Ventura would refuse the freak-offs to otherwise report Mr. Combs' abuse was met with ultimatums by Mr. Combs, who would say that Miss Ventura could not go to the police because she had a lot to lose. She had a lot to lose because he was going to throw all of that in her face. Now, remember earlier when we talked about these guns and all this other stuff. So if anything had popped off in regards to these guns, if anything had popped off in regards to these drugs, if anything had popped off to anything, he held her safety, he held her career, and he held all of that over her head. He made her feel like, oh, if you don't do what I say, if you don't do all this stuff I'm going to put out there that you're doing, because she was already lying to her folks that nothing was going on. They knew something was going on, but they couldn't prove or say anything because she was telling them no. So all of that was going on in all of this. So again, I can see why he dumped Kim Porter for her, because he had this pliable young woman that was doing everything that he wanted to do. And plus he was, Kim Porter had gotten older. He had basically used up everything that he needed to use up with her. She wasn't going to allow for him to do all the things that he was able to do. So he moved towards this younger person with Cassie. All right. So this is where we're going to go right here. Miss Ventura tries to escape Mr. Combs. Anytime she tried to create distance between her and Mr. Combs, he used his network to find her and convince her to return to his abuse. On multiple occasions, Mr. Combs sent his employees to lure Miss Ventura back. In 2011, during a rough patch in Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura's relationship, Miss Ventura had a brief relationship with musician Kid Cudi. When Mr. Combs returned from a trip, he demanded another freak-off from Miss Ventura. She acquiesced. During this freak-off, Mr. Combs found Miss Ventura's phone and found emails between her and Kid Cudi. Mr. Combs became enraged and proceeded to place a manual corkscrew between his fingers and lunge at Miss Ventura. Miss Ventura ran away to stay at Cuddy's home to escape Mr. Combs' wrath. Soon thereafter, one of Mr. Combs' staff members told Miss Ventura that he needed to just talk to Miss she needed to just talk to Mr. Combs, even though Mr. Combs was enraged. Feeling like she could not escape Mr. Combs and his network of enforcers, she returned to Mr. Combs. He hit her several times and then kicked her in the back as she tried to run out the door. She went to her parents' homes in Connecticut where her mother took pictures of the bruises that he had left. So she had gone to her parents' house. In February 2012, during Paris Fashion Week, Mr. Combs told Miss Ventura that he was going to blow up Kid Cudi's car and that he wanted to ensure that Kid Cudi was home with his friends when it happened. Sure. Around that time, Kid Cudi's car exploded in his driveway. Miss Ventura was terrified as she began to comprehend what Mr. Combs was both willing and able to do to those he believed had slighted him. In 2015, Miss Ventura spoke to a popular music. We talked about that, and he did that. When Mr. Combs, head of security, assistant saw Miss Ventura after the assault, they began to cry. Miss Ventura had two black eyes, a burst and bruised lip, and a huge welt on her forehead. Upon seeing the results of his vicious attack, Mr. Combs immediately took steps to conceal his wrongdoings. He forced Miss Ventura to stay at his home in Holmby Hills, along with the rest of his sons. Interesting. While there, Mr. Combs FaceTimed Miss Ventura and stated, "You gotta go up and put some more makeup on so my son can't see you like that." She did put more makeup on as he demanded. Miss Ventura felt that she had no choice but to obey her abuser. Even though security guards, assistants, and friends saw the situation she was in, no one dared to help or speak up on her behalf. She therefore had no choice but to remain subservient. Later in 2015, while shooting a movie in Cape Town, South Africa, Miss Ventura began a flirtatious relationship with an actor. She spent New Year's Eve with this actor, and Mr. Combs found out and called the actor and threatened him. The actor proceeded to call Miss Ventura and tell her, "You really need to call Mr. Combs." In or around March 16, 2016, during a freak off, here we go, at the Intercontinental Hotel in Century City, Los Angeles, Mr. Combs became extremely intoxicated and punched Miss Ventura in the face, giving her a black eye. After he fell asleep, Miss Ventura tried to leave the hotel, but as she exited, Mr. Combs awoke and began screaming at Miss Ventura. He followed her into the hallway of the hotel while yelling at her. He grabbed at her and then took glass vase in the hallway and threw them at her, causing glass to crash around them as she ran to the elevator to escape. She managed to get into the elevator because we didn't see that part of the video. We didn't see the part where she was able to escape. We saw where she went to the elevator at the beginning. She was trying to put on her shoes. He came running down the hallway. He punched her in the back of the head, then slung her down to the ground. We saw him kick her a couple of times, and then pick up her things, and then he dragged her back. He tried to, but he stopped. He then took the things that he had in his hand. He took them back to the hotel room, and then he came back and he threw that vase at her. She managed to get to the elevator, and when she got to the lobby, quickly took a cab to her apartment. Upon realizing that her running away would cause Mr. Combs to be even angry with her and completely stuck in his vicious cycle of abuse, Miss Ventura returned to the hotel with the intention of apologizing for running away. When she returned, hotel security, you see this, urged her to get back into the cab and go to her apartment, suggesting that they had seen the security footage showing Mr. Combs beating Miss Ventura and throwing glass at her in the hotel lobby. So I'm curious as to why, if they saw this and they encouraged her to do this, Even at the same time, why no one called the police at this particular time? But let's continue. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs paid the Intercontinental Century City $50,000 for the hallway security footage from that evening. After this, Miss Ventura left her home in Comstock and went to hide away at a friend's home in Florida. James Cruz, president of Bad Boy Management, tracked Miss Ventura down and told her single would not be released if she did not answer Mr. Combs' phone calls. So again, you've got this web of controlling all these little different things that she was doing in the music and things like that. Mm, 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 mm. A woman who worked at Sony Music reached out to her with similar ultimatums concerning her record. Incredibly, Mr. Combs even convinced one of his attorneys to call Miss Ventura at this time. This lawyer told Miss Ventura that if it is in your best interest to call Mr. Combs back. Each time Miss Ventura tried to run away, Mr. Combs and his powerful network would force her back. Yeah. And we won't go in because, this talks about when she tried to get away. I think she left him in 2019. Every time she tried, there was always something going on, always something going on. So I just wanted to go over that. Let me stop sharing my screen. But I did wanted to go over that. And then we see we kind of get this picture of what this young lady was going through while she was with Sean Combs. And even when he tried to make it seem, even when he tried to make it seem like there was really nothing going on and this was just a money grab and a cash grab, we clearly see that that's not what it was. We clearly see that that's not what it was, y'all. So what are y'all thinking about this after now rereading this lawsuit and seeing how this information is playing out and seeing that what she said in this lawsuit, and now we see that the feds are going through and they are raiding homes and all these other different things. Do you think these other lawsuits that are out, because we have one lawsuit where a college student alleged essay abuse with Puffy, and then there was another lawsuit where someone where a music executive, was it a music executive, had said something about there was a lawsuit against Puffy. I can't remember. There's so many at this point. And then we've got Little Rod's lawsuit. What are y'all thinking after seeing this, after seeing the video and all of this? What are y'all thinking about all of this? Because I mean, at this point, there is really, I don't know what he is going to claim, or what he is going to consider to be not truthful, and money grabs and all these little different things. I'm unsure about what he's going to be doing and thinking about these particular things, y'all. All right, like I said, I just wanted to kind of go back over this information now that we have seen the video. What do y'all think? Y'all leave that down in the comments for me. I know this video was a little longer and I know we've gone over other information, but I just thought I thought recapping this information on the heels of that video that came out would be refresh our memory about what's going on and all the things that young lady endured. All right. We do this every week. Y'all, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video if you care. Again, please make sure you tell a friend, you tell a kin, you tell a coworker, you tell that heifer that you can't stand that we are over here making these videos, child. And as always, people, bye-bye.